The Grand Chamber of the Valoran Imperial Flagship Eternal Dominion buzzed with anticipation. Admiral Krell stood with perfect posture, his scaled skin gleaming under the bright lights. For 3 centuries, the Valorans had expanded their reach across the stars, bringing hundreds of species under their rule. Some joined willingly, most did not. The outcome was always the same. "The human representative has arrived, Admiral," announced Lieutenant Pax, his voice tight with formality. Krell nodded. "Send in Ambassador Thex. Let us begin the standard procedures." The doors slid open to reveal a small delegation. The humans looked unexpectedly ordinary, bictal, soft-skinned, and fragile compared to the towering Valorans. Their leader wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration, a stark contrast to the ornate Valoran military dress. Ambassador Thex stepped forward, his ceremonial robes flowing around him. The Empire's most skilled diplomat had performed this ritual of conquest many times. "I am Ambassador Thex of the Valoran Empire, masters of the Galactic Core and rulers of 3,000 worlds," he announced, his translator converting his complex speech patterns into basic human language. "You stand before the representatives of Emperor Vex the Magnificent, whose mercy allows you this opportunity to join our civilization." The human delegation remained silent, their leader watching with calm eyes. Thex continued, "I bring terms from the Emperor himself. Your species will submit to imperial governance. Your military will disband. Your resources will support the greater good of the Empire. In exchange, you will receive imperial protection and technological benefits deemed appropriate for your development level." The room fell silent. This was the moment where most species began to negotiate, to plead, or in rare cases, to threaten before ultimately accepting reality. The human leader stepped forward. "I am Captain James Rivera of Earth's United Defense Force. I speak for all human colonies and Earth itself." Krell studied the human. Their intelligence reports showed humans controlled only a small sector of space, perhaps 20 habitable worlds with modest technology. Their ships were smaller than Valoran vessels, their weapons seemingly primitive. The conquest would be brief. "We have reviewed your terms, Ambassador," Rivera continued calmly, "and we have a message for your Emperor." Thex smiled indulgently. "The Emperor welcomes your wisdom in accepting the inevitable." "Our message is simple," Rivera said, his eyes never leaving the ambassadors. "Run." A confused silence fell over the chamber. Krell tilted his head, certain the translation had failed. "I don't understand," Thex finally said. "Perhaps you wish to negotiate specific surrender terms." "No negotiation," Rivera replied. "Just a warning. We've studied your empire since you entered our detection range 3 years ago. We know your methods. We know your history." He paused. "You've conquered many worlds, but you've never faced humans before." Krell stepped forward. "Is this a threat? Your military is a fraction of our size." Rivera didn't answer directly. Instead, he handed Thex a small data crystal. "This contains our official response to your terms. Once you review it, you can leave our space peacefully, or you can stay. The choice is yours." Without waiting for dismissal, Rivera and his delegation turned and walked out. Hours later, Krell reviewed the crystal's contents with Thex in the Admiral's private chambers. It contained only a brief historical overview of human conflicts, thousands of years of warfare among themselves, endless innovations in strategies, weapons, and tactics. "Primitive chest beating," Thex dismissed. "Every species has wars before reaching the stars." Krell wasn't so certain. Something about Rivera's calm confidence disturbed him. "Set course for their colony on Delta Proxima," Krell ordered. "We'll show them what happens when you refuse the Emperor's generosity." As the massive Valoran fleet moved toward human space, none of them understood that the warning had been genuine. They were about to learn why humans had told them to run. The Valoran battle group emerged from hyperspace above Delta Proxima, a modest human colony with a population of just over 1 million. 10 massive Imperial warships arranged themselves in standard conquest formation, their weapons primed and ready. Admiral Krell observed the blue-green planet on the main view screen. "Scans show minimal orbital defenses," reported his tactical officer. "Only 3 small military stations and a handful of patrol vessels." Krell nodded. "Standard procedure. Target their defense platforms first, then their communications array. Once they're isolated, we'll send the compliance message." The massive battleships moved forward with practiced precision. This operation had been performed hundreds of times across the galaxy. First, remove the target's ability to call for help. Then, demonstrate overwhelming power. Finally, accept their surrender. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the human stations." Before Krell could respond, the seemingly small defense platforms suddenly unfolded like mechanical flowers, revealing weapon systems far larger than their original profile suggested. "Evasive Manu." Krell's order was cut short as beams of concentrated energy sliced through the lead Valoran destroyer. "Impossible." Vex gasped from his observer position. "Our intelligence indicated nothing of this capability." The human patrol ships, previously dismissed as insignificant, accelerated at speeds that defied Valoran understanding of propulsion technology. They moved in unpredictable patterns, targeting weapon emplacements with surgical precision. "Return fire. Full spread," Krell commanded. The Valoran ships unleashed their arsenal, but the human vessels seemed to anticipate their targeting algorithms, slipping away moments before impact. A voice cut through their communications channel. "This is Admiral Elena Frost of the Earth Defense Force. Your weapons are ineffective against our shielding. Stand down and withdraw." Krell snarled, "Imperial forces do not retreat. Intensify forward firepower." The battle intensified. 3 more Valoran ships suffered critical damage as the humans employed tactics Krell had never witnessed: small drones that attached to hull sections before detonating, electronic warfare that temporarily blinded targeting systems, and weapons that seemed designed specifically to overcome Valoran defenses. "Sir, something's happening on the planet's surface," the sensor officer reported with alarm. What had appeared to be civilian settlements were transforming. Buildings sank into the ground or opened to reveal missile silos. What the Valorans had identified as agricultural facilities were launching swarms of combat drones. "They knew we were coming," Krell realized with growing dread. "This entire colony is a military installation disguised as a civilian outpost." The remaining Valoran ships found themselves caught in a perfect crossfire between orbital and planetary defenses. Their formations, developed over centuries of successful conquests, proved useless against the human approach to warfare. "Admiral," his second-in-command urged, "we must withdraw and regroup. We've lost half the fleet already." Krell's pride warred with his tactical sense. "Send a message to Imperial Command. Request reinforcements. The humans possess unexpected capabilities." As the surviving Valoran ships retreated to a safe distance, Admiral Frost's voice came through again. "This was just one colony, Admiral. One of our smaller outposts. Consider what awaits you at our core worlds." Back aboard the flagship, Krell reviewed the battle footage with growing concern. "They fight like no species we've encountered. Their tactics show creativity, adaptation during battle." Lieutenant Pax hesitantly spoke up. "Sir, I've been analyzing their communication patterns. They don't follow a central command structure like we do. Each unit seems capable of independent action, while still coordinating with the whole." Ambassador Thex, his confidence shaken, studied the human historical records more carefully now. "Their history, it's nothing but war. While we built an empire through overwhelmingly superior force, they've been fighting each other, constantly developing new ways to overcome stronger opponents." Krell's eyes narrowed as he made his decision. "Contact the Imperial fleet. We need at least 50 capital ships to subdue these humans." What Krell didn't understand yet was the humans hadn't been building an empire. They had been building a military. The Grand War Council of the Valoran Empire gathered in the holographic chamber aboard the Super Dreadnought Imperial Will 57 battleships had assembled at the edge of human space, the largest military force deployed in over a century. Admiral Krell stood before the projected image of Supreme Commander Draz, the Emperor's most trusted military leader. "These humans are nothing but a minor inconvenience," Draz declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Your failure at Delta Proxima was unexpected, but now we bring the true might of the Empire." Krell hesitated before speaking. "Supreme Commander, I believe we should reconsider our approach. The humans employ unusual tactics. The Empire does not adapt to lesser species." "Admiral," Draz interrupted, "they adapt to us. Your new orders are simple: total planetary subjugation. We will take their worlds one by one, starting with the colony they call New Horizon." The massive fleet moved through hyperspace toward the human colony. Intelligence reported New Horizon was primarily an agricultural world with minimal defenses, an easy target to demonstrate Imperial power. As the fleet approached, they detected only basic orbital stations and a small defense force. "See, Admiral," Draz commented from his command ship, "the previous engagement was an anomaly. This will be a standard conquest." The first wave of Valoran ships entered orbit, weapons charged. Unlike at Delta Proxima, the human forces didn't immediately engage. Instead, they pulled back, retreating to the planet's surface. "They flee before our might," Draz said with satisfaction. "Begin landing operations." Krell felt uneasy. "Supreme Commander, this withdrawal seems too organized. I recommend caution." His warning came too late. The first troop carriers had already begun their descent. As they entered the atmosphere, the true nature of the human strategy revealed itself. The planet's weather patterns suddenly changed. Massive storms appeared from nowhere, tossing the Valoran ships like toys. Those that made it through found themselves facing not a conventional army, but what appeared to be ordinary farmers, who transformed into highly coordinated guerrilla fighters. "They're using the environment against us," Krell realized as reports flooded in. "They've modified their planet's weather control systems as weapons." On the surface, Valoran ground forces found themselves ambushed by humans who seemed to disappear into underground tunnels before emerging elsewhere. Their equipment, disguised as farming machinery, converted into devastating weapons that specifically targeted Valoran armor weaknesses. "This is Major Green," came a calm human voice over the command channel. "Your troops are surrounded. We've studied Valoran physiology. The gas we're releasing isn't lethal to you, but it will paralyze your forces for several hours. You have 2 minutes to surrender before we deploy it." Draz roared in fury. "We do not surrender to primitives. All ships, bombard the surface." "The targeting systems are malfunctioning," reported a tactical officer. "Some kind of interference is scrambling our sensors." From the planet's dark side, previously undetected human vessels emerged, launching precision strikes against the Valoran fleet. They weren't trying to destroy the Empire's ships. They were disabling them with surgical accuracy. "They're testing us," Krell suddenly understood. "Learning our capabilities, our responses, our weaknesses. This isn't a real defense. It's intelligence gathering." Within hours, the mighty Imperial fleet was in disarray. 1/3 of their ships were disabled, their ground forces either captured or fighting a losing battle against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Supreme Commander Draz finally ordered a withdrawal, his pride shattered. Later, in the secure communication chamber, Krell received a priority message from Imperial intelligence. The officer's face was grim. "Admiral, we've intercepted human communications. They're not just defending. They're preparing for something larger. They call it Operation Turning Point. And worse, we've discovered they've been studying us for years before we even knew they existed." Krell stared at the star map showing human territory. "They were ready for us," he whispered. "The question is, How long have they been planning this war? The Imperial Palace on Valora Prime glittered with artificial light, its 1,000 spires reaching toward the stars the Empire had claimed as its birthright. Inside the Strategic Command Center, the mood was anything but triumphant. Emperor Vex the Magnificent sat motionless on his war throne, golden scales reflecting the holographic displays of battle reports. His inner circle stood in uncomfortable silence as Intelligence Officer Drav presented his findings. "Your Magnificence," Drav began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I've completed my analysis of human historical records. What we found is disturbing." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Drav activated the central display, showing images of human conflicts throughout their history. While we were building our empire, expanding peacefully when possible and conquering when necessary, humans were fighting each other. Constantly, without pause. The display shifted to show human weapons development over time. Most species reach space after unifying their planet and ending internal conflicts. Drav continued. Humans achieve spaceflight while still divided, still at war. They've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. Admiral Krell stepped forward. "This explains their tactics. No species we've encountered fights like them, because no species has their experience with warfare." The Emperor remained silent, watching as the display showed human military doctrine evolving over centuries. "There's more," Drav said grimly. "We've discovered evidence that humans detected our exploration vessels 3 years ago. Since then, they've been studying us, identifying our weaknesses." "Impossible," Supreme Commander Draz interrupted. "Our stealth technology is based on principles they're familiar with," Drav finished. "While we were assessing them as a conquest target, they were preparing for us." The Emperor finally spoke, his voice like grinding stone. "You're suggesting these primitives outmaneuvered our intelligence services?" "Yes, Your Magnificence," Drav replied. "And I found something even more concerning. Intercepted communications suggest humans have a concept they call asymmetric warfare, the strategy of a weaker force defeating a stronger one." The display shifted to show mathematical models comparing Imperial and human forces. "By conventional metrics, we outnumber them 20-1, Drav explained. "But they're not fighting conventionally. They've dispersed their forces, hidden their capabilities, and prepared defensive measures specifically designed against our tactics." Admiral Krell's expression darkened. "The colonies we've attacked weren't their strongholds. They were their early warning system, testing grounds to evaluate our capabilities." The Emperor's patience was wearing thin. "Get to the point, Officer Drav. How do we crush these humans?" Drav hesitated before answering. "That's just it, Your Magnificence. I'm not certain we can, not with conventional methods. They've turned their entire society into a war machine, but disguised it so well we didn't recognize it." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Torm, who had remained quiet until now, spoke up. "We should negotiate. Offer them a special status within the Empire." The Emperor's fist crashed down on his throne. "The Empire does not negotiate. We conquer. We rule. Prepare the Grand Armée. We will crush these humans with overwhelming force." As the council dispersed to carry out the Emperor's orders, Admiral Krell found himself walking alongside Drav in the palace corridor. "You didn't tell him everything, did you?" Krell asked quietly. Drav glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "No, the human historical records show something else, something the Emperor wouldn't understand. Humans don't fight for conquest like we do. They fight for survival. When threatened, they don't surrender. They unite and fight with everything they have." Krell remembered Captain Rivera's simple warning. "Run." "We should have listened," he murmured. "It gets worse," Drav added. "My sources indicate the humans have begun moving. Not retreating. Advancing. They're not waiting for our next attack." Krell stopped walking. "You mean?" "Yes, Admiral," Drav confirmed grimly. They're coming for us now. The alarm klaxons on Valoran Defense Station Epsilon blared without warning. Commander Lox rushed to the command center, his scales flushed with stress colors. "Report," he barked. "Unknown vessels approaching from multiple vectors." The sensor officer responded. They appeared simultaneously at 7 different entry points. Lox stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Epsilon Station guarded one of the Empire's key military shipyards, deep within Valoran space. No enemy should have been able to penetrate this far without triggering dozens of early warning systems. "How many ships?" he demanded. "That's the strange part, sir. Only 7 vessels. Small ones." Before Lox could process this information, the communication officer turned in panic. "Sir, we've lost contact with orbital defense platforms 3 through 9. Outside in the cold vacuum of space, 7 human vessels moved with impossible precision. Unlike the massive Valoran warships, these were compact, almost predatory in design. Each headed for a specific target within the system. Aboard the lead ship, _Swift Justice _, Major Thomas reviewed the mission parameters with his team. "Remember, we're not here to destroy. We're here to disable," he instructed. "Target their communication relays, power distribution nodes, and navigation systems. The Empire relies on centralized command. Without it, they fall apart." The human ships deployed smaller craft that attached themselves to key infrastructure points. They weren't bombs, they were electronic warfare platforms that began systematically shutting down Valoran systems. On Epsilon Station, chaos reigned as systems failed one after another. "Restore power to the defense grid," Lox ordered. "Sir, the systems are online, but they're not responding to commands," his lieutenant replied in confusion. "It's like something has rewritten our control protocols." Similar scenes played out across 17 Valoran systems simultaneously. Small human strike teams infiltrated defense networks, military bases, and communication hubs. They didn't engage in direct combat when possible. Instead, they surgically removed the Empire's ability to coordinate a response. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Vex raged as reports flooded in from across his domain. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Where is their main fleet?" Admiral Krell studied the reports with growing understanding. "They don't have one, Your Magnificence. They're not fighting like we do. This isn't a traditional invasion. It's a series of precise strikes designed to paralyze our response." On the Imperial Command Station, communications suddenly went dead. The holographic displays flickered and changed to show a single human face, Captain James Rivera. "People of the Valoran Empire," he began, his voice calm and measured. "Your military command structure has been temporarily disabled. Your leaders can no longer communicate with your forces. This demonstration is intended to show that we could destroy your infrastructure if we chose to. We have chosen not to." In the shipyards above Valora Prime, Major Thomas and his team completed their mission. The automated defense systems had been reconfigured to stand down. The massive construction facilities stood idle. All objectives secured, Thomas reported over the secure channel. Moving to extraction point. Across Valoran space, the human teams withdrew as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind confusion, disabled systems, and in some cases, detailed technical information about weaknesses in Valoran technology. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's most trusted technicians finally restored communications. The reports were devastating. Not a single Valoran ship had been destroyed, not a single soldier killed, but the Empire's military capability had been reduced by 60%. "This is impossible," Supreme Commander Draz whispered. They didn't follow any known military doctrine. Intelligence Officer Drav looked grim. They followed their own. Human history shows countless examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through what they call asymmetric warfare. They never intended to match our fleet's strength. They planned to make it irrelevant. Admiral Krell turned to the Emperor. "Your Magnificence, we must consider our options carefully. The humans have demonstrated they can strike anywhere in our territory, yet their attack was deliberately non-lethal. The Emperor's face was a mask of rage and disbelief. For the first time in his reign, he faced an enemy he did not understand. The Grand Council chamber of the Valoran Empire had never been so full nor so quiet. Regional governors, military commanders, and planetary representatives gathered in unprecedented numbers as reports continued to arrive from across Valoran space. The Centauri sector has declared neutrality, announced a messenger, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Governor Plex has severed ties with Imperial Command and opened direct communication with the humans. Emperor Vex slammed his fist on the ornate table. Treason, I will have his head. You cannot, Your Magnificence, Admiral Krell stated flatly. The Centauri sector's defense fleet has pledged loyalty to Plex, not to the Empire. And they're not alone. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed a map of the Empire, with nearly a third of its territories now highlighted in red, regions that had either declared independence or opened separate peace negotiations with the humans. The humans have made no attempt to conquer these territories, Intelligence Officer Drav explained. They simply offered non-aggression pacts to any who ceased hostilities. Ambassador Thex, who had been unusually quiet since the conflict began, finally spoke. This was never about conquest for them. They're dismantling our empire without firing a shot. A communication alert chimed, and the Imperial Chamberlain hesitated before speaking. Your Magnificence, we've received terms from the human leadership. The Emperor gestured impatiently, and the message appeared on the main display for all to see. 1. The Valoran Empire will cease all military operations against human territories. 2. All conquered species within the Empire will be granted self-determination. 3. A neutral zone will be established between human and Valoran space. 4. Technology exchange will be permitted for civilian purposes only. 5. War criminals who ordered attacks on civilian targets will stand trial. This is absurd, Supreme Commander Draz shouted. They speak as if they've won the war. Admiral Krell studied the terms carefully. Notice what they don't demand: our surrender, our resources, or our territory. They're not interested in ruling us. The Emperor's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Then what do they want? Intelligence Officer Drav pulled up human historical records. Based on their history, they want security. Humans have a concept they call deterrence, demonstrating enough power that potential enemies choose not to attack. From the back of the chamber, an elderly voice spoke up. It was High Counselor Mev, one of the few who remembered the early days of the Empire's expansion. I warned the previous Emperor about expansion at any cost, Mev said, her voice frail but clear. We've conquered so many that we've forgotten how to do anything else. These humans, they don't fight like warriors. They fight like cornered animals, with desperation and ingenuity we cannot match. The room fell silent as her words sank in. We should accept their terms, Krell suggested. They've shown restraint. Their attacks disabled our military capabilities, but deliberately avoided casualties when possible. The Emperor's face contorted with rage. Never. The Empire does not bend to the will of primitives. Prepare what remains of the fleet. We will strike at their homeworld directly. As council members filed out to carry out the Emperor's orders, Admiral Krell and Intelligence Officer Drav lingered behind. He doesn't understand what we're facing, Drav whispered. I've studied more of their history now. Humans developed weapons they never used, planet killers they built, then chose not to deploy because they feared their own creations. Krell nodded grimly. They've been holding back. What we've seen is merely their opening move. There's something else, Drav added, checking to ensure they weren't overheard. My sources report increased activity near Earth. They're preparing something big. Across Valoran space, more regions declared neutrality or independence. The once mighty empire was fracturing as worlds calculated that human protection was preferable to imperial rule. In his private quarters, Emperor Vex reviewed battle plans for an all-out assault on Earth. He remained convinced that enough firepower would crush these upstart humans. What he failed to understand was that humans had spent millennia preparing for threats they couldn't yet imagine. They didn't want to rule the Valoran Empire. They wanted to ensure it could never threaten them again. The imperial palace of Valora Prime was considered impenetrable, surrounded by the strongest planetary shield in the galaxy, protected by 3 orbital defense rings, and guarded by the Emperor's elite forces. It had never been breached in the 1,000-year history of the Empire. Emperor Vex stood in his war room, surrounded by his remaining loyal commanders. The massive fleet he had assembled for the final assault on Earth hung in orbit, awaiting his command. "We strike within the hour," the Emperor declared. "The humans have sown discord throughout our territories. But when their homeworld burns, the galaxy will remember why the Valoran Empire ruled for a millennium." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace. The Emperor's guards moved into defensive positions. "Report," Supreme Commander Draz demanded. The tactical officer stared at his display in disbelief. "Impossible. A single ship has appeared in the palace district. It penetrated all 3 defense rings without triggering alerts." On the palace landing pad, a sleek human vessel touched down gently. Its design was unlike any ship previously encountered. No visible weapons, engines that left no energy signature, and a hull that seemed to absorb rather than reflect sensor scans. The palace guards formed a perimeter, weapons ready. The ship's ramp lowered, and a single figure walked out. Captain James Rivera, wearing the same simple blue uniform from the first encounter, approached the palace entrance alone and unarmed. "I request an audience with Emperor Vex," he stated calmly. Within minutes, Rivera stood in the war room, surrounded by Valoran guards. The Emperor glared down at him from his elevated throne. "You have courage, human, coming here alone." The Emperor growled. "Have you come to surrender?" Rivera shook his head. "I've come to give you one last chance to accept our terms." The Emperor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "You stand in the heart of my empire, surrounded by my guards, while my fleet prepares to destroy your world. And you speak of terms." Rivera remained unnervingly calm. "When we first met, I gave you a warning. Run. You didn't listen. Since then, we've demonstrated only a fraction of our capabilities." "Demonstrations are over," the Emperor snarled. "Guards, seize him." The guards didn't move. "They can't hear you," Rivera explained. "At this moment, all communications within the palace are disabled. Your fleet commanders are watching a simulation, believing they're receiving orders from you." The Emperor's eyes widened in shock. "While we've been talking," Rivera continued, "human agents have accessed your weapons control systems. Your mighty fleet is now under our command. We didn't need to destroy them, just like we didn't need to kill your soldiers." As if to prove his point, the massive view screen activated, showing Valoran warships standing down, their weapons powering off. "How?" the Emperor whispered. "How did you do this?" Rivera's expression softened slightly. "For 3,000 years, we fought each other. We became experts in warfare, but also experts in ending conflicts. We learned that true victory isn't destroying your enemy. It's making them understand why fighting is futile." Intelligence Officer Drav and Admiral Krell entered the room, having finally realized what was happening. "Your Magnificence," Krell said, "it's true. The entire fleet has been neutralized. Somehow, they've accessed our command protocols." Rivera produced a small device and placed it on the war table. A holographic document appeared, the peace terms. "The choice remains yours, Emperor," Rivera said. "But know this, we could have destroyed your empire. We chose not to. That restraint is something your empire never showed to others." For the first time in his reign, Emperor Vex the Magnificent understood true defeat, not through destruction, but through the complete nullification of his power. "I will sign your terms," he said quietly. 3 days later, representatives from all corners of the galaxy gathered to witness the formal peace treaty. The once mighty Valoran Empire agreed to end all forced conquests. Former subject worlds were granted independence or autonomy according to their wishes. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Krell approached Captain Rivera. "You never wanted conquest," Krell stated. "Your warning wasn't a threat. It was genuine advice." Rivera nodded. "Humans don't seek an empire. We've learned from our history that empires always fall. We prefer alliances, mutual defense." Across the galaxy, former subject species of the Valoran Empire received offers of protection from Earth, not demands of submission, but promises of partnership. The greatest irony, as Intelligence Officer Drav noted in his final report, was that humanity had never known true peace on their own world. They had prepared for cosmic threats because they understood conflict better than any species in the galaxy. The warning had been fulfilled. The Empire had failed to run. And now the galaxy would never be the same.